Hello everybody, it's Sarah, and today we are going to talk about a series or a duology that, not gonna lie, is probably gonna be at the very top of my biggest surprises of 2024. Not necessarily because I was surprised that I enjoyed the duology. I don't usually tend to pick up books, aside from if there's like an external reason that I don't think I will enjoy. But because I did not expect to find this level of craft, kind of sounds mean, not gonna lie, in this duology that there was. Like, I expected this duology to fully just be a one and done, I'm having fun with it, now I'm moving on type duology, but this really isn't, and it both makes me want to go more into fantasy romance or certain fantasy romance books now, as well as makes me scared because I don't think, to be honest, most fantasy romance will have this type of storytelling. I'm gonna call it that within it. The duology I'm talking about is the Sheperd King duology by Rachel Gillick, as most of you will already know, or all of you will already know from clicking on this video, to be honest. The first book is One Dark Window, the second book is Two Twisted Crowns. I have had One Dark Window on my radar since it was published, I believe, in 2022. But I was always hesitant to pick it up because it does go more so under the fantasy romance umbrella, and I am not necessarily the biggest romance reader. In general, for those of you who have been on my channel a lot already, you will know I always say that I can take or leave the romance in most books, and it's very rare that I actually get invested in a romance. As such, fantasy romance as a genre isn't necessarily one that interests me, especially when it comes to high fantasy romance, because I am someone, when it comes to high fantasy, I am all about the world building, and fantasy romance just doesn't usually have a lot of that. By the way, the light is gonna go and come back again, probably over the course of filming this video, so if the lighting is all over the place, that's the reason why. Anyway, let me first talk about what this series is about, and after that we will talk about why exactly I ended up enjoying this duology so much. So this series is set in a world, in this kind of like small kingdom called, I think it was called Blunder, and in Blunder magic is outlawed. However, centuries ago there was a person called the Sheperd King who, with the Lady of the Wood, made like a series of bargains, and the result of those bargains were the so-called provenance cards. I think provenance, one or the other. Providence cards, that's what it's called. And these providence cards, there's different types, and of each type of card there exists a different number of cards. So for example, there's 2 of the nightmare card, there's I think 3 of the scythe, there's a certain number of the mirror card, etc. And these cards are the only way magic is allowed to be used. Aside from that, there's also people called infected. They are infected by magic and they are put to death because magic is outlawed. We follow our main character Elspeth, who when she was a child was infected. However, she was hidden by her family, so she has survived into adulthood, and everyone who's infected has different or gets different types of abilities from that. And for Elspeth, it is that when she touches a providence card, she absorbs that card into herself. And when she was a child, she touched a nightmare card and she absorbed a creature that she calls the nightmare into herself, who is kind of just, you know, sitting inside of her, talking to her, etc. And so we follow Elspeth as she meets a basically captain of the guard of the king, who brings her into the fold of a group of basically traitors to the king, whose goal it is to get together all providence cards, because when you get together all providence cards you can heal infected and heal magic. And yeah, that's a rough summary. I was already more detailed than I intended to be. It's not spoilery, it's just set up, but yeah, that's basically the story. And obviously there's gonna be romance in there, since this does also go under the fantasy romance genre. However, what I do love about this is that this is the type of fantasy romance where I would say like the non-romance part of the plot as well as the romance part of the plot are on equal footing, if not that the non-romance part every now and again is more important and the romance is more there to like spice things up. Not spice things up as in spicy scenes, although there are certainly some spicy scenes, especially in the second book. Well, not overly graphic spicy scenes, but there are some spicy scenes anyway. But I would say that, you know, the non-romance plot part is definitely in the forefront during most of the series. To be honest, I don't really have that much negative to say about it. Like, the main negative things is that in certain aspects it could be more detailed. There's some elements that don't quite make sense, like Elspeth and this captain of the guard start fake courting. Basically, there's like a fake dating type of trope, fake courting, because it's high fantasy. And to like have a cover, Elspeth moves in with the captain of the guard and his family in his like ancestral seat, where I'm like, okay, historically though, does that make sense with courting? Don't you want like, I don't know, space between the two and like supervision and everything? But it's whatever, it doesn't really matter that much, to be honest. So it's just little details like that. I really appreciated also, like, with the world building, that it was very contained. Actually, it very much gave me the feel of fairy tales, where you just have like a really tiny little kingdom, which basically is just the main capital and then some villages around that you don't ever really get to see. And it gave, as I said, it gave a very fairy tale vibe, because for those of you who have read the originals of the Grimm's fairy tales, it's also like, you know, every single fairy tale is its own little kingdom, and there's a king and there's a princess and whatever, which is somewhat historically accurate to how Germany worked, because for a long time it was just a bunch of very tiny kingdoms. Aside from that, I would say surprisingly that I personally preferred book 2 over book 1. And I can't really talk too much about why that is. However, I'm gonna say that in book 2, other characters are a central focus rather than the main character, and I really appreciated that. And that's like really the reason why I adored this series so much. Not gonna lie, like, I gave neither of the books 5 stars. I think I gave this one, if I remember correctly, like 4.25, 4.5 stars, and I think I gave this one 4.75 stars. However, as a duology, this is absolutely a 5-star duology. And the reason is the narrative choices, or narration choices, I should say, that the author made. And I can't talk about those narration choices because they are kind of spoilery for the end of book 1. And it kind of really upsets me because I want to talk about it. So I'm gonna talk about it in a spoiler-free way, or I'm gonna try to. However, let's actually first talk about the characters. I really enjoyed the characters. I loved Elspeth as main character. I loved the Nightmare as a character and as a character concept. I thought that the love interest from book 1, not gonna lie, was pretty standard and like maybe a little bit boring. Like there was nothing really to latch onto with him for me personally. I loved our central POV character in book 2, whose name I forgot already again. What was his name? Renelm, that was the full name. Who is the younger prince of the kingdom. I loved the love story in book 2 because the couple that we follow in book 2 is a different one than the couple we follow in book 1. Like, book 1 is first person POV from Elspeth's point of view. In book 2 we do still get Elspeth's POV as well. However, we get 2 additional POVs. One of them is third person, the love interest from book 1, and the other one that I would say is the main focus in book 2 is Renelm, who's the younger prince and who has his own love story than in book 2. I loved the love interest of Renelm. I loved everything surrounding that, which I also can't talk about because it's spoilers. But basically there was magic influences in there that I really appreciated and I really enjoyed, and I don't know, I really liked them. Aside from that, I also really appreciated, like, there was an instant okay, I don't know how to talk about this in like in non-spoilery ways, but there was something towards the end where I was like, okay, this is gonna be a standard fantasy thing, it's gonna happen like this or roughly like this. However, there was an instant where I genuinely believed that it might not happen like this, even though I still knew it was gonna happen like this. And the fact that the author managed to do that is really fucking impressive. You're probably all so confused right now by what I'm talking about, but just believe me, it was really, really well done. I basically, by the way, I read book 2 in basically a sitting in one day. Like at least most, like 2/3 of book 2 at least. And now as for the narrative parts, which are the parts that I enjoy so much. As I said, it's different POVs in the 2 books. I'm not gonna tell you anything about why there's different POVs, etc. However, there's a reason why book 2 has different POVs, and while Elspeth as a whole still is undoubtedly the main character, like she's the character that everything is about, even though she's not always the POV character, I was very, very impressed by the author's decision to consciously switch the narration from book 1. And not in a way where we often see it in romance series where, you know, book 1 focuses on one couple and so you have their POV, and book 2 focuses on a different couple and so you have their POV, and then book 3 focuses on a different couple again. No, it wasn't really like that. Like, Elspeth was still our one first-person POV character, but there was a very specific choice why other POVs were added, and how little Elspeth really had POV chapters in book 2. And I thought that choice, that the author just went there and didn't try to completely switch lanes or completely switch sides, but still keep Elspeth as a main character with the additional other narration stuff going on, was just really interesting, and just like, it was so good. It was so good. And I can't tell you why exactly it was so good without going like deeply into spoilers, because, you know, it basically has to do with the entire finale of book 1. But I was really happy, and there is so few things aside from like very specific world building stuff. There's so few things that make me happier in books and more impressed in books than seeing authors making conscious writing decisions that maybe sometimes are a bit tricky or maybe are a bit risky, and seeing those writing decisions executed well. And that is definitely the case in this book. Like the first book, not gonna lie, I had a lot of fun with it. It was the type of fun that I've been looking for a while again. I've been talking about how I've been struggling with finding fantasy books where I'm just like, you know, this is a bingeable book that I have surface level fun with, that maybe is good, maybe is a bit trashy, whatever, it doesn't matter, but I can just, you know, I can just fall into the book and afterwards I close the book and I'm done with it and I had fun. I had a good time with it and that's it. Like, just those types of 4-star books. And this first book was the type of book for me again. So I was really happy with this first book. However, then I read this one and it turned from just a fun read into a really impressive duology. And now I want to try and see if I can find more of that in this type of fantasy romance, because sometimes, like, while I do enjoy and love world building, I also can really appreciate it if I find books that are fantasy and are whimsical, that aren't too in-depth with world building because they don't need it, and that have exactly the amount of world building that they need. And so yeah, anyway, I'm rambling. This review once again is too long. I'm trying to keep my reviews shorter because no one wants to see like a 25-minute review, let's be honest. And so yeah, I can just say I can highly recommend these two books, this duology, and I haven't looked into if Rachel Gillick has published anything since Two Twisted Crowns or if there's anything planned, but I'm definitely gonna start keeping an eye out for this author. And yeah, with that said, that is it for my review. If you have read the duology, tell me in the comments down below what were your thoughts on it. If you haven't, have I convinced you of picking up the duology? If you enjoyed this video, what you think about, give me a thumbs up and also maybe subscribing. All the links to my social media as well as to my book club of Queens, Witches and Valkyries, where I read one adult fantasy book written by a woman or genderqueer person per month, will be left linked down below. By the way, we did read One Dark Window in that book club. And with all of that said, that's it, and I hope I'll see you soon. Bye!